In parts 1 and 2, we've talked about apparitions that were not of dead people, and explored how these may have still been the Man in Black through his ability to project sensory illusions to the mentally vulnerable. But now let's talk about a mysterious appearance that is witnessed by two individuals who both seem completely mentally stable in the time surrounding said encounter. In the Season 4 episode, The Other Woman, while searching for the recently missing Faraday and Charlotte, Juliet receives a mysterious visit from her former therapist, Harper Stanhope.
Hello, Juliet.
In this exchange, Harper informs Juliet where Charlotte and Faraday are heading, why they are going there, and instructs Juliet to stop them by using deadly force. All of which she claims to be communicating on Ben's behalf.
What are you doing here?
I came to deliver a message from Ben. The two people you're looking for, Faraday and Lewis, they're headed to the Tempest. And if they figure out how to deploy that gas, then everyone on this island is going to die.
How am I supposed to stop them?
By pointing the gun and pulling the trigger.
Juliet reasonably questions how Ben could know and communicate all of this while currently being Locke's prisoner. Harper's response, which fails to actually answer the question, is that Ben is exactly where he wants to be.
How can Ben possibly know where they are when he's a prisoner?
Ben is exactly where he wants to be.
Considering this episode ends with Ben being released by John, yet choosing to remain in the barracks, it would seem this statement is actually true. But the insinuation by Harper seems to be that this is where Ben planned to end up all along, and that he foresaw events unfolding to such a point where Juliet would be in a position to stop Daniel and Charlotte, all of which we know is not true. Season 3 ends with a series of Ben's plans being foiled. First, he suffers two back-to-back betrayals that he failed to see coming. One by Juliet.
How did you find out about this station?
Juliet told us.
And one by Alex. These betrayals cause his ordered attack on the beach camp to go horribly wrong, and exposes his lies about the Looking Glass station being flooded.
You told us the Looking Glass was inoperable, flooded.
I lied.
Next, his attempt to convince Jack to give him the satellite phone fails, at which point he is taken prisoner, and the freighter is called and guided to the island. It is extremely clear that Ben desperately did not want the freighter to find the island.
Jack, please, you don't know what you're doing.
I know exactly what I'm doing. What are you doing, John?
I don't want to shoot you. Do it, John. Shoot him. Do what you need.
It is only after several events he failed to predict that he ends up captured. And after his many bad decisions resulted in the deaths of all of his most loyal on-island followers, the remaining others seem genuinely too disillusioned with him to attempt a rescue.
Now might not be the best time to go tromping off on your own. Oh, really? And why not? Because people are asking questions, Ben. About leaving home, about what happened to Locke, about Jacob. Not to mention the rapidly spreading rumor that everyone who went down to the beach is dead.
They're not all dead.
It is because of this series of events that Ben has no better option than to remain with Locke's group in the relative safety of the barracks. But at no point after things spiraled this far out of control did Ben have any obvious way to communicate with Harper or anyone else from his group. But even if he somehow had been able to contact them, and even if they were still willing to follow his orders, given how dire the situation is, why wouldn't Harper, and or the others, stop them themselves? especially considering Harper clearly knows the pair recently left the beach camp and therefore surely witnessed them leaving.
The two people you're looking for, Faraday and Lewis, they're headed to the Tempest.
Harper likewise brushes this question aside with another vague, nonsensical reply.
Why don't you stop them?
Because Ben wants you to go.
But why would Ben have trusted Juliet, who had just committed the ultimate betrayal a couple days earlier, with such a mission, the failure of which could mean the death of everyone on the island, or, at the very least, the loss of one of his few remaining defenses against the looming threat of the mercenaries?
Whatever he's doing, tell him to stop. We're trying to disable it before he can use it against us!
None of Harper's explanations for why she's telling Juliet to do this, how she knows what she knows, or why she's not handling it herself, make any sense. Everything about this seems to fit an all too familiar pattern. A sudden appearance of someone from a character's past gives them instructions that aren't entirely clear, which leads to a dangerous situation in which one or more people die or nearly die. Add in the fact that Harper instantly appears and disappears to the sound of the whispers.
Jack?
Which, as we've repeatedly discussed, very often accompany confirmed appearances of the monster, makes it seem certain that this is the Man in Black.
I just told her where the people you're looking for are headed. Maybe you and your gun can go too.
This does make far more sense than the idea that Ben is responsible, especially when considering Juliet's attempt to stop the two scientists comes frighteningly close to causing the gas to be released.
5, 4, 3, 2.
This potentially could have resulted in the deaths of everyone on the island.
Now, a little less than a kilometer from here, he has me working with chemicals. That could kill every man, woman, and child on this island if I flip the wrong switch.
Which would have been a jackpot for the Man in Black in terms of candidate deaths. But if this is the Man in Black, how has he taken Harper's form? Considering the fact that neither Juliet nor Jack seem in any way mentally impaired in this scene, it seems undeniable that this is a completely corporeal, physically present manifestation. And that would mean Harper must be dead by this point in time. The issue with this is that Juliet's reaction does not seem to indicate she believed Harper to be dead. Sure, she's surprised to see her, but she displays nowhere near the level of shock one would expect to see from someone who's encountering an undead individual.
What are you doing here?
So this would mean that if Harper truly had died, Juliet must not have known about it. This is possible, given that Juliet had spent the past 2 weeks with the 815ers. However, it would be awfully convenient if Harper had just happened to randomly die off screen during this time. But what if it wasn't random, or off screen? In the Season 3 finale, more than a dozen others die as a result of Ben's orders. Most of them we know the identities of, but a few we do not. All 3 of the unidentified others are part of the 10-person team that attempts to capture the pregnant women at the beach camp. In this sequence, we see Jason fall back to the rear of the group, likely to oversee things from a distance and provide cover if needed. This, of course, enables him to surprise Saeed at the end of the standoff. Meanwhile, the other 9 split into groups of 3, each of which approaches one of the 3 tents marked with white coral. The first group is led by Ryan, and contains the familiar faces of the background others, Matthew and Luke. The second trio is led by Diane, and features 2 males that we get pretty decent looks at, and neither of them is familiar. The third and final group is led by Tom, but the 2 remaining others in his group we only get the briefest glimpses of. Presumably, one of these is Ivan, as Tom later names him specifically as one of those killed.
What?
They're all dead. Diane, Ivan, all of them dead.
And while the actor that played Ivan previously does not appear to have been playing him in this episode, the only character that looks even remotely like him is indeed in Tom's group. But the last person in this last group, the 10th and final member of this team, appears to be a dark-haired woman. The tent detonated by Saeed kills Diane and the 2 unidentified males. The second tent, detonated by Bernard, fails to kill the fleeing Tom, but does take out the other 2, including the woman.
Please, God. Get away from me!
Could this have been Harper? While I would agree that at first glance, Harper would be an odd choice for this sort of strike team, I actually think it makes sense for her to have been brought along for this particular mission. This team's objective was to tranquilize and transport pregnant women, and possibly all of the 815's women had Juliet not yet marked the tents.
Wait, moving up the schedule, but Juliet may not be ready. What if she hasn't had time
Then
to
we'll
identify
take all
the-
their women. And we'll sort out the ones we need later.
As a psychiatrist, Harper would be the best person besides Juliet to gauge how much tranquilizer would be safe to use on the pregnant women. And considering these 10 people would not have been able to transport about twice that many unconscious women, there was a potential scenario in which some of the women would had to have been captured and left conscious. Harper's expertise as a psychiatrist would likely have been quite valuable in such a situation, where these captives would have to be kept compliant and relatively calm. So it actually is conceivable that Harper may have been the unidentified woman that was killed in this ambush. And considering how unrecognizable the bodies of the people killed in the explosions would now be, it's possible Juliet may have even buried Harper without realizing it. This would have provided the Man in Black, with his recently gained insight into Juliet's mind, the perfect opportunity to manipulate her into killing at least 2 people, and potentially everyone else on the island, in the process.
How am I supposed to stop them?
By pointing the gun and pulling the trigger.
Next time, we'll be discussing an apparition that combines both the form of a deceased person with the projection of sensory information to a mentally vulnerable individual. Until then, namaste and good luck. Oh, you're still here. Hopefully that means you enjoyed this video. If so, please consider sticking around and being a constant for this channel by clicking right up here to subscribe. And don't forget to hit the bell icon if you would like to be notified when more videos like this one arrive. In the meantime, feel free to check out previous content from this channel by clicking here or here. Oh no. Please subscribe.